Hello and welcome. You are listening to the Gay with God podcast, a safe place for us to share our stories and support one another. How long did we know? What challenges did we face? Did we lose our faith? When did we find our way back home? Or are we still searching? The stories you hear on this podcast will melt your heart and strengthen your belief that in God, all things are possible, and you can be authentically gay with the God of your understanding. I am your host, Midge Noble, and I am very honored that you are here. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Gay with God podcast. I just love it when you guys show up, and I love it when you give me great comments. And even if you don't give me great comments, it's okay. I don't really pay attention. But I do pay attention to the good ones. So keep doing that and keep reviewing and sharing and offering to have people come on as a guest. If you know someone in your circle that's going to be a great guest for Gay with God, please send them my way. So because next week I'm going to have to be live by myself unless y'all come up with somebody to tag somebody. People, you don't want to hear me just for the whole time, but if you do, that's fine too. I'll just give it a little snippet of the memoir or talk about something. You know, I can talk. So anyway, I don't have to do that today because I have a great guest. I want to introduce you to Anna Renée Winget. Pronouns are they, them. Is a playwright, scholar, and artivist. They currently serve as a University of California Humanities Research Institute scholar and professor of theater at Loyola, there we go, Loyola Marymount University. Anna's new book, The Palgrave Handbook of Queer and Trans Feminisms, is available from Palgrave Macmillan. Their most recent play, Utah Queer, explores the relationship between faith and queerness through the lens of a Mormon lesbian in southern Utah who moonlights as a drag performer. Anna recently served as a mental health project manager at RFSL, Sweden's national organization for the LGBTQI rights. They hold a doctorate in drama and theater from the University of California at Irvine and at San Diego, focused on gender, performance, and healing. Anna teaches theater and writing and holds an MFA in playwriting from Boston University. Their new storytelling project, Crossing Pride, aims to develop sustainable creative healing, networking, and archiving by and for queer and trans refugees who are stateless, seeking asylum, or otherwise displaced. Anna is now pursuing their drama therapy certification from the Drama Therapy Institute of Los Angeles. Wow. I did a little snippet earlier, just Facebook Live, talking about what's coming up. And I just was so blown away with your credentials and everything you're doing, Anna. I'm so excited for this conversation. And I thank you so much for being here.
Wow. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the work that you do. I think it's really so important, especially we just, had these new statistics coming out of kids, LGBT youth, and how the percentage who think about taking their own lives, which is still more than half. And it's absolutely, it's not okay. And it's heartbreaking. And then I'm very worried at this particular moment for the future of our country and our especially LGBT youth. I think the message that you not preach maybe, or maybe you would say preach, but that you're delivering of like acceptance and that there's a safe space that you can have your faith and you can be queer, gay, whatever term you want to use. And that's so needed right now. So I just appreciate being here and thanks for what you do.
Well, thank you. Thank you for all that. And I'm just honored to do it. I'm so glad that I fell into this at this time of my life and also at the time of the country, because more than ever, especially, you can't say gay in this state. Now we're going to take women's rights here, and we're in a very pivotal shift, and it's going to be a massive shift, and it's going to be difficult as we go through it. So your work, my work, our ministry, and I think it's all ministry when we're promoting love and we're speaking about love. That's ministry, because that is the greatest commandment, is to love each other and to support each other. You do that through arts and through, you know, all of the work that you do. And I do it through this as much as I'm able. So we just have one disclaimer, Anna and I, is that Anna is babysitting a puppy, and I have a very scared puppy that is going through a storm with me right now. So if you hear anything, we're both fine. And we may cut it out, or we may just leave it in for your enjoyment if anything goes wrong. But I want to get you guys to know Anna better. So Anna, tell us your story.
Thank you. Where to begin? But I as I said, I love the topic of gay with God, and just bringing together being gay and having a love for God, having a faith, because it was really something I grappled so much with from the time I was a kid. I went through a lot of self-loathing. I was raised Mormon, and I had a loving family, and I loved church, and I loved Mormonism, and I loved Jesus. Like from the time I was little, I went to girls' camp, you know, and like I would be like the one seriously like concentrating on like the Bible stories, like you know, and like not goofing off. Like I was like really into it, and during the sacrament, I remember like really taking that in, and like what Jesus like did for us, and all the love that he had for me. And I'm grateful for Mormonism, that as a kid, I always had somewhere to go. Like I had Jesus. I had, at that time, my Heavenly Father. I don't connect as much to that like image of God now. God is so expansive, is love. For me now, and I don't like to put limitations on an image of God, but from a very young age, like Mormonism did teach me, I was loved unconditionally by God. I'm a child of God, and of course there were like alternative teachings, other perspectives that I also internalized. But that was one thing that I'll always be grateful for, and that's, I'll never hate or speak ill of the Mormon Church as a whole. I have my, you know, obviously my perspectives that I deeply disagree with on their policies and practices, but there's still gratitude, and I still have family and you know, close friends and family friends that are very accepting of me. But there was so much pain when I first started having feelings for women. So I was identifying as a girl. I identify as non-binary now, and I use they, them pronouns, as you said. But I started to have this attraction for women, and it started, it was like impossible in the 90s, like an impossibility. I couldn't even, I wasn't even grappling with it at first, because there was so much denial, right? So in the 90s, the context being AIDS outbreaks, and like anytime, whenever you heard the word gay, it was in conjunction with AIDS.
Yep.
And that was, of course, very strategically done in the media. And so I really, my first impression of gay was that it was a disease, and I was, you know, like 9 or 8 when at that time in the early 90s, and I was like, that's I mean, that's bad.
Yeah, right.
I'm never gonna be that.
Yeah,
like that. I gotta stay away from those people.
Right.
And you don't want to catch whatever they have, you know, just terrible. But so, I mean, even when I started noticing feelings, I didn't understand what gay was, and I didn't understand like that attraction could mean anything about my identity, because
Right.
my identity was so caught up in being a good Mormon girl.
Right.
But at the same time, I grew up in California in the Bay Area. I was I was discriminated against a little bit as a kid because in the Mormon church, because I was raised by a single mom, and like family is everything to Mormons. And
Mm.
like my dad left with his 4 kids from a previous marriage and moved back to Utah. And he came from this big Mormon family. Winget is a very Mormon name. There's a lot of Wingets in Utah, but so I was kind of like treated differently, but I learned again, like I remember at recess having my little Book of Mormon in my neon green fanny pack, and like, like reading it, and kids were just like, I was like the weird one, that was in Utah when we lived there for a period of time. And so most of the kids in my class were Mormon. So I was like the weird one who didn't have a family.
Mm.
And so I've always felt different even before I understood I was queer. And I found, I first saw Bette Midler when I was, I think, 5 years old, and like Beaches came out, and I was like, just absolutely mesmerized. Like, wow, I did not know that a woman could talk like that, could look like that. She was just like everything a Mormon woman was not supposed to be. And I loved it. I just was like, so I don't know, somehow with Bette Midler and her being a performer, I was like instantly drawn to theater and like in performance. And so I started doing that very young, and it kind of paved the way for this very unhealthy double life where I could kind of have this freedom to explore, but then I could still be the good Mormon girl on, Sundays. That's really what my play is about. And because I wasn't willing to give up for many, many, many years, I wasn't willing to give up either my queerness or my faith. That was like, they've always been so integral to who I am. From the time I was a kid until now. And I haven't lost my faith. I would say I'm no longer Mormon, but my faith has shifted. I'm grateful that it's always been about my relationship to whatever higher power that resonated with me at the time. So it wasn't dependent on me going to church. Of course, I feel so much for Mormon kids now, like, or anytime, because it's so steeped in community and family. And so, it is an impossible choice. Like, I don't see, when I've done research, and there's this organization called Affirmation that's LGBTQ Mormons. They do conferences and advocacy, and they do a lot of great work. And I've interviewed people and like read a lot, like did all this research. Most people have had a break with the church in order to fully be themselves. And that I think that's really tragic, that you have to make a choice between, family and your community. It's not just faith. It's like faith permeates everything in your everyday life. So the choice of like coming out becomes this, it's not just about identity. It's about like, am I going to have a place to live? Am I going to have,
Yes.
are my parents going to accept? Even today, with Mormonism, and I just think there's so many closeted people living a compromised, like settling for a life that didn't want to break with their family and their community. And I can totally understand and respect that, but it's deeply sad.
It's deeply sad, and I think it takes a toll on us physically. I think
Yeah,
our bodies are sick when we're not
yeah,
authentic, and
yeah.
we put everything in the way to cover up what's really going on with us, even, especially to ourselves, before we fully embrace our authenticity. We put all of these smoke screens out there we have to deal with this eating disorder. We have to deal with this job that we work at all the time, or we have to keep splitting ourselves in order to not deal with the truth because of what you just said. Will my family be there for me? Will I have to break for them? Will they have to break for me so they can still be Mormon? I don't know if I think that's a thing in the Mormon faith, right? That the families can't be around other family members or friends if they're not Mormon, or is that?
I mean, you wouldn't be excommunicated for
Okay.
that, but I mean, certainly the stigma
Mm-hmm.
socially in the community is would run deep.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I think in Mormonism, you have more of an effort of bringing them back to the
Oh,
fold. So
yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like everyone rallying around like the new project. Oh no, they they had like this girl has a girlfriend. Like we have to do everything we can
Uh-huh.
to introduce them to all the most eligible bachelors.
Never
And
again can you go
show
anywhere
them.
alone. You're so and so's
Right.
brothers, sisters.
Exactly.
Oh my,
Yeah.
my.
Um,
Phew.
so I've had family members like, kind of tracking me down and sending missionaries. I like to say sicking missionaries on me. Like I and I understand it. I am
Yeah.
like I'm past the place of being angry about it because I know that it doesn't always come from love. It certainly sometimes comes from judgment and hate. But I think
Mm-hmm.
with some of my family members, it's like I know that they think that what
Mm-hmm.
they're doing for me by sending
Mm-hmm.
missionaries to me is an act of love and concern.
Yeah.
Um, and so I just kind of,
Yeah.
pray for them and try.
We got battling prayers
Yeah,
going on.
right.
Save her. I don't need to be saved by
Yeah.
that.
Right.
Oh
Right.
my
I know.
gosh. Yeah.
We'll see whose wins. My God is better. My God is all
That's right.
encompassing love.
That's right. That's right. He saves the rainbow sheep online. Have you seen the comics? I love David Hardgrave, and he does all those great cartoons of Jesus saving the rainbow sheep, and all the other sheep are like, that sheep is bad or something like that, and he says, I know that that she is fine, because Jesus was being appropriate with the pronouns, so it just happened to be a trans sheep, and so they weren't, they were being mean, and Jesus
Oh,
took the little trans sheep in and used the correct
oh.
pronoun.
That's
He
so
does great.
sweet.
Yeah, he does great
Yeah.
cartoons. But I think that's interesting that I always wondered, and this is just totally off the subject, but we'll roll with it, that when people are praying for their sports teams to win, it's like,
Right.
one, I don't even know if God's watching the football or the basketball, but how does that work? You can't have these conflicting prayers because God that flips a coin. I don't know.
Yeah, God
Yeah.
doesn't care. Spoiler alert, God
Spoiler
doesn't care
alert. Yeah.
what team wins.
And he loves us all. That's been my biggest
Right.
yeah, that's been my biggest thorn in my flesh lately, is that there are certain people on this earth right now, and I have had to come to terms with the
Yeah.
fact that no matter how vile they are, that God actually loves them as much as God loves me. And I'm like, that's not fair. I'm trying to do the right thing here. but it's true. And
it's hard.
It's hard. So
With certain politicians, and I've been there
yep.
myself, or people who inflict trauma
Yes.
on youth or have inflicted trauma on me. a journey of forgiveness. And sometimes it helps me to remind myself I'm also like forgiving for myself, because I don't want to carry around that hatred. I don't want to like, that's burdening me. That's adding onto my trauma. It's not healing me.
Right.
So when it's hard to find that compassion, I'm like, well, it's a little selfish too. I'm doing it for me. that can help.
Well, but I think that's great, because when we heal ourselves, even when we have to do it that way, then we can serve better and higher, because we're not pulled down with that hatred and that anger. So just like all of the hiding that we do before we come into authenticity, all of the anger that we carry with us, it shuts down your creativity. It shuts down your expression, you know. And I think anger is the same thing as hiding, is that it blocks the flow of love, and it also creates more trauma for us. And God doesn't want that either. So I think that's an appropriate way to handle it.
Absolutely. You're reminding me, I've been reading this a new book that came out, A Queer Dharma, Yoga and Meditations for Liberation by Jacoby Ballard. And there's a whole chapter on forgiveness. And but what the book is doing is like kind of in looking at the yoga community and looking at the social justice community and kind of what they can learn from each other, and how, you know, social justice communities often like making itself sicker. I mean, of course, there's many different communities than social change and social justice, but when you're fighting from this place of like, I was traumatized and I have this anger, there eventually you hit a wall and you get sick, and you can't keep it up. It's not sustainable. The anger also bleeds out into maybe with your family or loved ones. And so, you know, how do we pause? And that's a lot of my work also like explores these intersections of healing and social change. I think so many of us who are interested in social change have been personally impacted by, you know, some kind of trauma socially, have been discarded or discriminated against in some way. And then we want to right those wrongs. We personally know how it feels. I know how it feels to, you know, be rejected by my family. I know how it feels to not have my relationship accepted legally. And you know, and so of course there's that desire to make it right, but then which is really beautiful, but it has to, as you're saying, that love is the ministry, right? And I think love needs to be at the foundation of social change movements as well, that we love ourselves, we love each other, we love a world that isn't here yet. You know, we have an image, like we know that there's something better. We know we deserve better. We know that there is something out there that that we can experience outside of this kind of hate and polarization that we're seeing now, and just that there's something else. Like there's something, I think, in all of us that rejects that, and we don't always know what to do with that. But I'm really learning, and this is kind of personal and professional, but to pause and accept, and not be, there's a time for acceptance and a time for resistance, I think. And like pausing and accepting the reality that we're in, there's kind of this surrender, and that's when you can kind of open up to whatever your higher power is, and to this, to that higher love that is greater than ourselves. And from there, then it's like your resistance isn't about your small self, but your resistance is like opening up to a greater fight than yourself, you know? And I think that comes from, that's like bringing more energy. That's like, that's not the kind of work that's gonna burn you out, but it's not easy. I mean, I've had 3 big burnouts. I tell my students all the time, because they come with all this like passion and wanting to change things. I'm like, I'm 37. I've had 3 burnouts, medical burnouts, where I've, you know, because I've just thought I could do it all, and that I had to do it all, and that my value hinged on doing it all. And it's been a lot, you know, a lot of learning, a lot of humbling, and accepting that I, you know, I think it goes back to my Mormonism, like that I wasn't worthy of God's love because I was, you know, doing the wrong things or thinking the wrong things. And it's like, it created this like void, or this sense of self that was very small. And I spent a lot of my therapy and adulthood and like work and just trying to open up. Like, I think receiving love is like the hardest thing, especially when we've been told we don't deserve it. Or maybe we haven't even been told, but we've been shown that again and again, as LGBT people, or, you know, folks of color, or disabled people, or whoever's not cis white straight Christian man. I you know, so we have to really work to remind ourselves of our that we are worthy, and of that love, and that we are, I mean, I think that's actually who we are. That's what our soul is as well. Yeah, we're not that's like we shouldn't get too metaphysical maybe, but like that's another podcast.
That's right. Well, but I totally agree with everything you're saying, Anna, because we steal ourselves away, sort of like when we were realizing way back then, when you were 8, you were 9, you were like, oh my gosh, you know, Bette Miller is the heat, and I'm feeling a little heat just looking at Bette Miller, and and that's bad, and that's wrong, and I've got to shut that down. We go through so much trauma to shut it down, put it away, lock it up. But even though we lock it up, it's still present. And it's like one of the apps on the phone. You may not be using that app right now, but it's running in the background, and it's still sapping the energy. So as long as we have that going on, then we are keeping and walling that away so successfully that we don't receive the good stuff. And then we believe that we don't deserve the good stuff because of what everybody said. So when you talk about, you know, burning out and not feeling like you're worthy of God's love, man, that just resonates for all of us, I think, because we were taught that by people that we trusted, by people that we loved, and they used the scriptures that were supposedly, you know, inspired by God to tell us how bad we are, when really it never was that. And I'm just now learning at 63, which is really old, by the way, when you think about just finally coming into your own. I mean, I've known I was gay, but I haven't been able to embrace it without all of the yuck, you know, the inner homophobia, or the doubts. And every time, you know, a new person sits behind the big wooden desk, they can give us rights or they can take them away. And, you know, and now let's just pass laws that say it's going to be a law now that we're all bad, you know. So all of that stuff keeps us from just believing 100% that it was always God's intention that we have diversity on this planet. But it kind of got messed up when the first need was to propagate the earth. So, you know, I'm going to give you Adam and Eve, but that doesn't mean that later on I won't say Steve's fine too. You know, it is
it's
God,
not like we
all.
Need more people populating the planet.
That's right. Yeah, I just think it's so funny to think that God is static. You know, this is it, and that is not, you know, growing and you know, trying different things. I mean,
Yeah.
I just believe that, we're probably not even the only planet if we really want to get out there. I mean, God, I think God has
Yeah.
more going on than just us. And that's okay.
Yeah.
And that's okay. So
Oh yeah, I agree. I think it's like we know that the universe is expanding all the time and is
yeah.
basically infinite. So the
Yeah.
idea that we're the
Yeah.
only like intelligent creatures is like beyond self-absorbed again,
Right.
typical American capitalist like
Yep.
belief, like
Yep. It's
it's
all
it's
about
all
me.
about us. Yeah. The
That's right.
entire universe is
Yeah.
about me.
Yeah. And everybody's white and everybody needs to be Christian. And no,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
I just find that so hysterical. It's like Jesus wasn't even Christian, people. He was Jewish. So come on now.
And he
Brown,
wasn't he
Jewish.
wasn't white.
That's right,
Yeah.
not white. But we've
Yeah,
just painted this fake story of our history in our
I
lives.
know.
And so burnout does happen because we're rushed. I think we feel rushed. Maybe it's just me. I feel urgent to get something done because I'm on the other side of 50. So
Yeah.
now I feel this urgency to get it right but I'm not the only one here doing the work. I do what I can and I do it with love and with abandon, but I also know, especially now, that you have to pause. You have to give
Yeah.
somebody else a chance. You got to work with someone else. You can't do it alone. You can't do it all the time. You
Yeah.
absolutely. I'm so glad that you've come to a place where you know how precious your work is, so that when you pause, when you take breaks, there's still apps going for other people too. They're doing the work too, and you'll be more
Yeah.
energized.
I've really seen that. And I've seen the positive effects too. And it's such a habit. And it's not just the religious background and the trauma. It's very much like embedded in our society that
Mhm.
the whole our productivity being equated with self-worth is, I think,
Yes.
so many people struggle
Mhm.
with that, whatever their
Mhm.
background. And
Yep.
it's really hard to let go of, and Buddhist teachers talk about like the trance, and it's like it feels like sometimes I'm just like, what, like, do I actually care about this like award or this like
Mhm.
fellowship, like, or
Mhm.
is it just because I need more and the competition and
Mm.
the, because this is what is expected of me at my field, at my level, and I have to prove something,
Mhm.
and it's so that the pausing is so crucial, where you're really checking in with yourself, and I love that you mentioned living authentically,
Mhm.
and something that has stuck with me. I always listen to the Tara Brach podcast, and really have been influenced by her work on like radical compassion, radical acceptance, which really helped me in my own self-love journey. And she tells the story many times of a palliative care worker who said the number one thing that she would hear from people who were, crossing over in their process of dying was that their greatest regret was not having lived authentically.
Mm.
And that's so powerful. And I think, whatever age and whatever space you are in your life or whatever your circumstances, it's never too late to get in touch with that authenticity and to
Mhm.
live from that. I mean, I've also felt that at times, like, even though I was out in my 20s, I wasn't living in my
Mhm.
authenticity. I didn't give myself the freedom to explore my gender. And for one thing,
Mm.
I still was like wearing what I thought I was supposed to
Yeah.
wear and acting the way I was even though it's like it was bad enough, quote unquote, that I was gay. I couldn't be, some kind of trans, or I couldn't be some kind of I couldn't be other things that weren't accepted in my community. So it's, I think, and it was very hard to break from that, because once you find some level of acceptance, if you've been in communities that have not accepted you, you kind of want to cling to that. But but it may not be your truth either. You might be
Mm.
like, oh, like I think when I first started, when I found the queer community in my 20s, I was like overcompensating for like denying myself that for so long. And like, I got to be the queer, like, I mean, and what's funny is now I'm a professional queer. Like I like to say, like I teach queer studies and all, but I was I was like, I think what it was is that I was different people. I was a different person around different people. I was a chameleon. I was a people pleaser.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really know who I was. It was kind of like, I'll be who I am is wrong. So I will be whoever you need me to be in this moment. And I can shapeshift
Mm-hmm.
and then the thing is, you get praised for that because, if you're a people pleaser, people like that you're agreeable and they like that you're nice and
Yep.
you'll go along with whatever you want, that they want you to do. And they want you to be easy like that. They don't want your truth.
Yep.
So
Yep.
it's really difficult, but it's been the more and more I can step into my truth, which for me has also been a sobriety journey, I will say. And I was using, alcohol as a way to hide from my truth. I think that's also a very common story. And so like getting sober, being like just allowing, I'm also doing IFS therapy. It's called internal family systems, which all begins from a place of curiosity and compassion, which is just like lightning bolts for me. Like, I mean, wow, like to begin the whole, psychotherapy is like so much around pathology and like, you go to a therapist because there's something wrong with you and you need to be fixed.
Yep.
But like, we all have our crap, we all have our trauma and our issues. So it's, if you can like actually approach your healing journey from a place of curiosity, like, oh, that's interesting that this anxiety is coming up. Well, I wonder what it's trying to teach me. I wonder why it's protecting me from something. Let me dig a little deeper. And IFS and drama therapy are really about like accepting all these different parts of ourselves, not compartmentalizing, but it's a process of integration. And like there's a place for, my scared inner child that felt abandoned at age 4. I don't need to exile that child. I can invite them in, and there's a place for them. There's a place for my anger. There's a place, it's just about giving them space. It's listening and offering compassion and trying to understand rather than just going to judgment and hating these parts of ourselves, which just ends up, perpetuating what we don't want, and adding more suffering for ourselves.
Yeah, that was beautiful. I love the part where you talked about overcompensating and wanting to be what everybody else wanted you to be. How exhausting is that, right?
Yeah.
How exhausting is that? And it all comes from that tender place of, please, like me because I don't think God likes me. And when you get to that place that the one person or the one entity that we should be able to believe in and to feel solace, like you did back at the girls' camp, you were so understanding at that point that you were beloved, and then everybody else marred that and got it to a place where you weren't sure. And I'm so glad that you're on the other side of that, and you still recognize that the journey can't ever be over because everything's a trigger. There's always something else. It's like, who knew who knew that Roe versus Wade would go? I mean, no matter where you feel or what you think about that as a topic, it's still the bigger story is that nothing is sacred and nothing is in cement.
Mm.
So that we're always teetering on the edge of something that could be catastrophic, especially for our community.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you see it in the posts right now. You see it in the fear is coming up and using our biggest cover up emotion, anger,
Yeah.
because we're feeling vulnerable and shakeable again.
Right.
And now everybody's just getting pissed. And as we talked about love, this is the time where if we can pause and just remember that if we stay connected to the love, we can advocate. But if we do it with too much harshness, we're not going to get where we want to go. There,
Right.
and I don't know where the balance is. I know that the pacifists, did their best back in the day, and change happened, but a lot of people died, making change. And so it's just
Right.
like I said before, it's such a huge shift. And being able to stay in your truth and get clean and sober and dig deep and find that trauma connection that we all have, and work toward easing that up and bringing acceptance to all the feelings, because there were no wrong feelings. Right. We were not wrong. We're still beloved.
Absolutely. And I love everything you said. And I think in terms of where that falls into the movement, I think what I've found and the research I've done corroborates this as well, that the more that I can accept all these parts of myself that I've found in the past to be unacceptable, it's much easier to extend that to someone else. And it's you in the program, we say you can't give away what you don't have. And it's like, we always hear this image too of the putting the oxygen mask on yourself before somebody else, but it's it's true in so many respects, that if you're taking care of yourself and your own trauma, and not stopping there, because you don't live in a vacuum either. We're connected to our world, our community, our family, our society, and I think we have those of us, especially who have some degree of privilege, have a responsibility to do something to make things better, and from a place of love, like the way you would fight for your brother or sister if they were going through something challenging, right? But you need to find it within yourself first, and for me, that's also what my meditation practice does every day. It's like kind of bring that connection to myself and connect to my higher power, and remind myself like I belong, I'm loved, I deserve to be happy, to be loved, to have a good day today. And then that kind of is my armor and empowers me to go about and do the work that I do, and that helps give me the power. I work with LGBT refugees, which has it has been very difficult, and there's so much complex trauma. They've escaped their homelands because they were in danger of being murdered, or had been like narrowly escaping death just for being LGBT, and are seeking asylum, in other countries. I would, push myself. I didn't put myself first. If I skipped my meditation, or if I did something because I would tell myself like, well, their issues are more like their life and death. They're dealing with real tough like stuff way more than me, right? So it was like very easy to kind of spend more time and energy on helping, and neglect my own healing work. And very quickly I could see how that would it just didn't work. I had less and less to give them, and I was energetically. I remember, like, I would get comments sometimes like, you look really stressed out. It's like, that's the energy that I'm bringing. What, like, they don't need more stress in their lives, you know. I don't need stress. Like, why am I bringing that with me?
Yeah.
Why am I allowing this? Really, it's that healing, and kind of commitment to your own, self-healing, self-love, self-acceptance. I just think it's crucial, no matter what you. And then the same would be true with, if you're a parent. I'm not a parent. I'm, you know, a dog parent, but
it counts. It counts.
Yeah. But you know, you don't have it. You need. It's so crucial to have that time where you're recharging and connecting to whatever you're. I love that you put on your website, like, and you say God of your own understanding, because they because so many of us have been, you know, forced to see God as this, like, this white man in the sky, who's, you know,
he's gonna whomp you. He's gonna whomp you.
Right.
Well, and as you were talking, I was thinking too that when we get out of our groove, our healing groove for ourselves, whether it's meditation or yoga, whatever we're doing, and even our spiritual practice, you know, whether that's whatever that spiritual practice is, when we let that go, the only thing we have to fall back on is our history of coping. And for someone with addiction, or some addiction history, or someone with self-loathing history, as soon as we start seeing that we're not showing up the way people expect, or we're not giving as much as people want, then we go back to doubting ourselves again and our worthiness, and we go through that whole loop. And then that's when we're in trouble. We're in a lot of trouble. So, you know, I think it's, you know, what do they say, that the HALT method, if you're hungry, angry, lonely, tired, you better watch out, because you're going to relapse, or something's going to happen. And even if you're, you know, don't deal with addiction, you're going to relapse into hating yourself, or you're going to relapse into hating others, or, you know, just thinking that God's not there for you. When that's never been the case. You know, this is a human problem, not a God problem. You know, God never walked away. I did, because I was confused and scared and angry, really angry. And, you know, using the word God only brought up images of abomination and me going to hell. So I didn't use that word for the longest time. That's why we have it proudly displayed now on the podcast, because it has no negative power over me anymore.
You reclaimed it.
I reclaimed it. Yeah.
That's beautiful. I had to do that as well.
Yeah.
And I still have a hard time with Heavenly Father, because that's what's used more often than anything else in the Mormon church. I mean, I also had a difficult relationship with my father, but for me, like, Divine Mother is a really great, beautiful, like, I just see that it's much easier to access that unconditional love feeling. So it's like whatever works for you to be able to open up to that truth.
Well, you know, when that, you know, and people say, but that's what Jesus preached. Well, of course he did, because you got to know the room. You didn't talk about women back in the day. So of course it's going to be father.
You know, and Jesus, you know, if that was the way that Jesus connected to his God, that worked for him. There's been other saints, and, you know, I know that's Christians be like, well, there's no other Jesus. But, you know, but there have been other prophets and leaders, even if you don't believe in their power, but they have different relationships to different deities, and yet I think the common thread is love. And unity of some kind, you know, among all of them. So that's really, really beautiful that you clung on to that as well. And
well, and I told somebody the other day that, you know, if you look at what Lao Tzu taught back in the day, That's what Jesus taught. I think that God has given us so many different examples of how to find love and how to be compassionate. It's like, okay, maybe let me give you a Lao Tzu. Can you get that? Okay, no. Okay, let me give you.
Yeah, no,
Jesus.
it's funny you bring up Lao Tzu, because in my undergrad, I went to Loyola Marymount, and sorry, it's a hard one to say.
It was.
It's a Jesuit university. And I went there as an undergrad, and I was a theater major and a philosophy major, but my thesis project it was called Unifying the Philosophies of the One. And it took Plotinus is an ancient Greek philosopher, and what he said about the one, and Taoism, and what Taoism said about the one, and then I had Absolute Knowing from Hegel. I took a whole class on Hegel, and it was like the same stuff. And I was like taking this class on Plotinus and Hegel. I'm like, you guys are saying the same
That's
thing.
right. Ditto.
One is like deeply Christian, and one is, before Christ came.
Yeah.
And so there's something to that, we just need to, find kind of whatever way that we're able to resonate with that.
Yes.
And is impactful for us individually, because we're all so different, but yet we need to connect to something greater than ourselves.
Yep. And the God of our understanding will understand and be okay. Because I don't think that naming God is a prerequisite to anything. I don't think we have to have. I've told this story before, that when I was using creator of all that is, because that's the only thing I could do, and I could connect to divinity that way. And my mother outed me on Facebook and said, right on Facebook, so I see that you don't use the word God anymore, and you only say creator of all that is. Are you still a Christian? Are you still saved? And I'm like, really?
Oh, wow.
Here on Facebook? Really? But, so
Wow.
and so I said, well, do you believe that God is the creator of all that is? Well, of course. Then what's the problem?
Good response. Yeah.
What's the problem? And then I took it offline, but I was like, we got more to say. Well, before we go today, and I want to give you an opportunity to talk more about crossing pride and a little bit of what that looks like and the power behind all of that.
Oh, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, it's early in its development, but I started doing this work with, as I said, with LGBT refugees in Sweden, where I was a mental health project manager, and I have this background in performance and performance studies, and performance is a healing tool. So I worked with some refugee leaders in Sweden, and we started creating these groups around performance and healing. We did a collaboration with the National Black Theatre of Sweden, with Stockholm University of the Arts, and we created workshops. And there's been a lot of work with drama therapy and work with using performance for healing. What this project is doing, it's creating a website. So there's a digital accessible component. So on that website, the website will function as an archive of LGBT refugee stories that transnationally, and so there'll be kind of information about different countries, and what their kind of laws are, and what are LGBT people going through in that country right now. So there's this kind of public facing aspect that's educational and archival. What we're piloting this year is kind of taking these workshops that I started with some leaders in Stockholm, and we have new collaborations with folks working on the Mexico, California border, and we want to create a series of workshops that is allowing for creative expression of self, of storytelling that is truly coming from your own desire to share your story in whatever way you need to for the queer and trans refugees, rather than for state mandated purposes. So it's not so much about the product of getting the story or having a performance. It's really focused on developing a process that is community building and healing for local groups, and then kind of sharing that knowledge transnationally, and then having a platform where these groups can also get to know each other. Maybe refugees from, for instance, Uganda could, who are like in a difficult situation, will learn something and be able to find somebody in another location who's already migrated. So there's that kind of support network. And then also that there will be stories on for whoever wants to share, and whoever is, there's no pressure on whether they want to share it with the public or not. And there's also going to be opportunities to donate to different groups that we're collaborating with, organizations who are doing really important work with LGBT refugees. But yeah, I mean, over 70 countries today still criminalize same-sex intimacy. And there's a lot of people at risk. Of course, just because it's legal in the US doesn't mean that we don't have danger here.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But there's a lot abroad as well that I think is important to remember and gets overlooked a lot during even Pride festivities.
Yep. The priest at the Episcopal church where I go is offered to do a Pride Mass for us tomorrow evening. And just yesterday, I heard that someone asked, were we going to have security? And I'm like, And I have been thinking about that since he offered. And I said, yes, because I run a LGBTQ group here, a meetup group here in Asheboro, North Carolina, one of the reddest states, little reddest community you could be. But, and there's been questions about that, in 2019, back when life existed, openly, we were given permission our little group was given permission to walk in the Christmas parade, and we had our big old banner of LGBTQIA and allies, and we walked, and people were scared shittolius. They really were. They were scared to death. And I'm like, you know what? And so we had several people that had been in law enforcement, and they walked with us, and they were watching, and they were, scanning the crowd and all this kind of stuff. But it was like, wow, I'm somewhat naive, and I'm somewhat not. Like, I had thought about it. I was aware of it. I knew that there were the same people who were with us during the parade were going to be at this mass tomorrow evening, but some people are afraid to come. And isn't that a shame that you would be afraid to come to a church that is open and affirming and loving and inclusive, to have a mass and a celebration, because people are nuts. And they don't, they think they need to hurt us. But
it's true. I mean, I actually, I'm in New York right now. I live in California, but New York just changed the gun laws, so we have open carry in New York now. And they came, and that law changed the day before Roe v. Wade was overturned. And then Pride was like the next day after that. And I did not end up going to Pride. I felt with the gun laws you had in Oslo, they just had an attack on a Pride parade there, and 2 people died and like 20 were injured. And I mean, Oslo, like Norway
Yeah.
is supposed to
Yeah.
be one of the safest
Yeah.
places to go. They take refugees from other countries, like on the basis of being LGBT. It's a crazy, scary time.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of anger, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
hate. And
Mm-hmm.
I think, not to say don't go to the mass,
Yeah.
but
Well,
we have to live our lives.
Yep.
And I think it's awesome that they are having that mass.
Yeah. Yeah.
But these fears are also
Mm-hmm.
real.
Yes. Yes. Caution is important. And I believe in that too. We have to take care of ourselves, whatever that looks like. And who's ever there, I will embrace whoever, comes, and I'm going to be there. And yet, I'm nervous. I've always been nervous about going to a pride parade because I know that there's always somebody that can show up and do damage. But it is in that fear that we all light workers, and I call all of us in ministry a light worker, that we are always subjected to the dark side, whatever that dark side looks like, and whatever that is. And yet we will persevere no matter how many get knocked down. We're going to persevere and live in the light. Live in the light.
That's beautiful.
Well, I wanted to also give you the opportunity for the final question that I usually ask folks on the podcast is, what is the one thing you would want to say to someone else who is coming up and going through some of the traumatic experiences that you had, whether it's the same or different, but that's really searching and feeling like they're not loved and that they're not worthy? What could somebody have said to you or done for you that would have helped ease that pain? And you can feel free to offer that to the listeners who are maybe still in that space.
That's a beautiful question. Thank you for asking that. I think it would have made a huge difference. It's so simple. It's just to be told you're okay. You're enough. And you're okay. That just that. Yeah. There's absolutely nothing wrong with you. Mm-hmm. You are as God intended you to be. Mm-hmm. I mean, that would have had particularly strong weight if family members could say that to me. So if you have, allies who are like people who are struggling with kids or loved ones in your family, I think that's all I really wanted to hear, is that there was nothing wrong. There was absolutely nothing I needed to change about myself. The only changes I've needed to make in adulthood has been learning to love and accept myself exactly as I am. Yeah. And that's what people are afraid of you figuring out. Because there's so much power in that. That's the faith that moves mountains. I mean, like if you can love yourself and realize that all the hatred, all the noise is lies and is not of the light.
I love that. I'm writing this down. The hatred and the noise are the lies. That's beautiful too. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's good. That's very good. Thank you so much. Thank you for that.
This has been a very inspiring and uplifting conversation. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, you are welcome. And thank you for coming. Guys, I hate to end this. You know that I love this so much. But there will be another day and Anna will be doing something else and she'll call and say, hey, I'd love to come back on the podcast. And I'll say, you're welcome anytime. And it'll be great. We'll have a little reunion. But anyway, thank you so much. And thank you guys, listeners, for coming back each week, supporting, sharing, and subscribing wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to see more information and links to connect with Anna, they will be on the show page. You just go to the Gay with God show page at empoweredmidge.podbean.com. And as always, if you are questioning whether you can be gay and be in relationship with God, if you are authentically LGBTQIA+, you've always been with God, and God has always been with you. The God of your understanding does not have you be anything other than who you are. Thank you, everybody. See you next week. Stay tuned to hear how you can join the Gay with God podcast. Remember, the Gay with God community. And remember that I've recently started a monthly Faith Journey Zoom group with the Facebook group called Gay with God. So if you check us out there, you can join that group with me. And remember that the Wild Goose Festival is coming up July 14th through the 17th. The Gay with God podcast will be there again this year in the heat. Last year it was really cool. This year it will not be. It's going to be in the heat, but I'm going to be there even though I'm a cool weather baby. And we're going to do the podcast live from the Wild Goose. If you don't know about the Wild Goose, please check it out. Just Google Wild Goose Festival. You will find it. It's an amazing, eclectic, diverse population of believers on all spectrums, and you will really find exactly what you're looking for because everything is there. So you'll find something that will be akin to you. So if you need any support on your coming out faith journey story, you can go also to the show page, scroll all the way down to the bottom and find out how to connect with me, and we can get into some coaching. So love you guys. Take care and see you next week. I want to invite you to become a part of the Gay with God community. How can you do that? Stay connected by messaging me your thoughts and comments in the comment section under the downloads of the show on the Gay with God show page. Subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen and share so we can increase our community outreach and be a light to those who are struggling to claim their faith. Consider being a sponsor so I can highlight your service in our community. We are all worthy of respect and a relationship with the God of our understanding. I want to thank you in advance for supporting this podcast. Together, we as a community will keep this show visible and our community stronger. Deep gratitude to my friend Tim McClendon of Tim McClendon Music for allowing me to use an excerpt from Interlude 4, a song found on his CD entitled Sundance.